Good afternoon, everyone. We're going to get started. We are running late, as I mentioned before, and we need to get you through this so you can have the break, and the bear pit, I believe, is after this, so we may have to shorten this slightly, but we're going to try to get going here right away. I want to first of all welcome you to today's session. It takes all pieces of the puzzle, cultivating a diverse council. This section is sponsored by AECOM, and if you're sharp and ready for it, take all pieces of the puzzle, cultivating a diverse council. My name is Dale Domey. I'm the SUMA Director for Southwest Saskatchewan and Mayor of Mortlach. Please note that this session is being recorded. That means that if you have a question, we're going to ask you to please come up to the mic and speak loud and clear into the mic and present your question. That way we have the question recorded as well as the answer, and it also allows our presenters to hear the question properly. And when you do that, please identify your name and municipality so we know who you are. I also want to mention that all of the presentations will be available to you on SUMA's YouTube channel. We want those recordings to be a good resource, and that's why we need all of your questions recorded. I'm not going to read the biographies of our presenters today. That time is better spent listening to them speak. And they are available on Eventbase, which is a free app that we use at the convention. So those bios are available to you later on if you want to go there yourself. Now it's my pleasure to introduce Jamal-e-Fatima Rafat, Welcoming and Inclusive Communities Project Coordinator and Multicultural Council of Saskatchewan, as well as Tammy Roberts, who is responsible for Equal Voice, Saskatchewan's media relations. And we want to thank you both for joining us today. And we want to thank all of you delegates for taking part in this as well. So with a warm welcome for our presenters, please.
Hi there, my name is Tammy Robert. Thank you all for being here. I know that there's a lot of issues right now facing your towns, your villages where you live. So I appreciate the fact that you felt the need to come down and listen to this topic because it is important, but I do know that you're facing a lot of challenges. I am the only member of Equal Voice in Saskatchewan. I don't think it's me, but after this is over, please don't hesitate to let me know if you're interested in participating. Equal Voice is, I guess I'm supposed to do this. Equal Voice was founded in 2001. It is primarily based out of Ottawa. I was born and raised in Saskatchewan. My grandparents were born in Outlook and Watrous. This presentation is from Ontario, so I'll apologize now if it doesn't feel relevant at points. Equal Voice brings women together, and it's a multi-partisan organization. So obviously women in politics are going to be affiliated with, if they're not at the municipal level, with a political party. So there are women both on the National Council and there used to be in the Saskatchewan Council from all parties, working to one goal. 14 chapters and 4 universities. I think the U of S is actually going to make 5 right away. So this is Saskatchewan. We're looking at, I don't know why they put the colors like this, but if it's, the men are the darker blue and women are, I guess, more of that pinky color, but it works out to 26% of our legislators are women in Saskatchewan. And they've put legislators there, but that original number did encompass municipalities as well. So I'm going to stop there because I can hear you all thinking to yourselves, who cares? Like, why does that matter? What's wrong with electing the right person for the job instead of worrying about whether or not they're a man or a woman. Well, the reason it matters is because when we look at that 26% number, what we're really saying, if we're going based solely on merit, is that we're saying 74% of women in this province are not competent or interested in politics. And just based on the room here, I mean, we know that that's not true. We can get into that debate. I can bring stats, but I think I'm hoping that we can operate on the assumption today that women are generally equally as interested in being elected or being a politician at any level as men are. So if we're operating on that assumption, meritocracy, which is what that whole best candidate theory is all about, it really doesn't work. I'm going to cite, just to kind of back that up, I'm going to cite a study. It was held at MIT. The professor's name was Emilio Castilla. And he studied a huge company, 9,000 employees. And it was a company that was very proud and vocal about its commitment to diversity. They solely based their hiring and their compensation for their employees on merit. So this professor, he studied this company for a few years, and after 4 years, his analysis showed that women and minorities were receiving smaller compensation or less compensation compared to the male employees. Now, all of these employees that he studied, they had the same jobs, the same units, same supervisors, and the same amount of, the same performance score, which is probably the most important. So they still were not being compared equally. And what he found, or what his conclusion was, that even though they felt they were putting performance first, the company was still obviously making women and minorities work harder for the same pay. And his conclusion, after he teamed up with another professor, I mean, you get it, it's a one body of research, but his conclusion was, when we think we're being unbiased and objective, we stop monitoring and checking ourselves. We assume that we're right. And that is actually the perfect environment to unleash bias. So this he compared to a separate study he did on a company that held blind auditions, only paper auditions for hiring and for performance audits. And in that case, you can guess, women and minorities actually came in higher than they did when they were examining them on a face-to-face basis. So, I'm just going to see where I'm supposed to be on slides here. If we allow ourselves to acknowledge that women and men are equally competent and interested in politics, and maybe insisting we're all about merits only isn't actually accurate, that maybe we think we're doing that, but that we're really not, suddenly those statistics become a bit more significant. I think we can agree that maybe there's something more going on as to why that number in Saskatchewan is so low. It's certainly not the lowest in the country, which is nice, but it is still pretty low. So, now that we've established that those numbers are important, why is it important to even them out? Well, first of all, women make up half of the population. And I think it's fair to say that our lives and our experiences and our needs are different. So why wouldn't we want 50% of the population, of your voters, represented in decision-making in your locales, in your communities? Even if we don't want to admit it, it's more important to us than we realize. And this is where cross-national studies, including a NATO study, show male and female voters consider governments just like yours more fair and legitimate when more women are elected. So even if we're not admitting it to ourselves right now, this is what studies show. Another reason it's important is that increased participation from women on your councils equals positive development and stability in government. And I won't get into citing all the studies, but I took a UN and a World Bank study on that. And finally, the long-term impact of making an effort to ensure that there are more women on your council will have a positive long-term impact on the public perception of women as leaders. So if you have a daughter or granddaughter or a niece, that should be, and I'm sure it is, really important to you, because if it's not for us, it's for them. And I'm sure you want them to have the exact same opportunities when they're ready as you did. So now we'll get back to this. I'm not used to working with slides. All right, let's look quickly here at how we get to government. And the first piece of the puzzle is deciding you want to do it. Then you got to win the nomination, and I know appreciate in municipalities that we're jumping right to the election. And then you govern. So it seems pretty straightforward. But here are some of the challenges that women, based on Canadian and American studies, tend to face, and they're really at times their own worst enemy. They feel they are less qualified, and they need more encouragement to run. So, but women are asked less frequently. I mean, we all know about the process of running. You have to know before you throw your name in that people support you, and women are less likely to ask for that. And they have to be asked more times. So it may sound, why do we have to ask them so many times? It's just the way it is right now. Once those numbers get up, then we can worry about, things being a little bit different. But for now, they need to be asked. They need to be asked more. And then there's the nomination. And I know that this doesn't necessarily apply in this room, so I'm just going to go through it quickly because it sort of applies to, wanting to be in that role. Cost, predictability, and transparency matter. There tends to not be that if you're involved in provincial politics. Nominations are, I think they say that they're most undemocratic thing about democracy, and they're not covered by the Elections Act, including in Saskatchewan, so we don't know how many women run and how often they win. That looks like those are federal numbers, so they're fairly standard across the board. And this is women make up 1/3, so I guess it was a little higher than that in the Saskatchewan election. Women as MPs, again, it's relatively low in Saskatchewan. Women as MLAs, we're getting there, not very fast. And here's the numbers as they relate to municipalities for both city councilors and mayors. So I'll just, take your attention back to what I said earlier about accepting these numbers on merit means that we're saying that all the rest of those women are not competent or interested. And again, I think we can agree that that's not necessarily the case. Canada's got some work to do too. This slide, it talks about the House of Commons, and it talks about the fact that women tend to bring more diversity to a council and to a race. But I'm going to leave that for Jamal to expand upon. Women in committees in Saskatchewan, we have 3 committees that are made up only of men, and we have a really small number of women on all of our committees, and that's really where a lot of the decision-making happens. Because it's 2017, okay, I get where they're going with that, but Saskatchewan is just one of the 2 provinces in Canada where women are less well represented in cabinet than they are in the legislature. So again, it's an area where we could consider doing better. If there are really more women in proportion to what we have in cabinet right now, it's not unfair to ask for at least a little bit more of an effort in promoting the women in government into those positions. This is another factor. I mean, historically, all of these institutions were conceived before women had the right to vote. They have evolved, absolutely they have, and I'm sure your councils have evolved too as your municipality has grown and changed. But it doesn't hurt to look at the institutions that make up your council and see if there's anything that you could change to make things a little bit easier. And this is a big one, is the hours and opportunities for work-life balance. There was an interparliamentary study conducted that said that women find the biggest challenges to running for any level of government were, first, their domestic responsibilities, second, the attitudes in their community about women running or female politicians. Third was lack of family support. Fourth was lack of confidence. And fifth was lack of cash. Men cited lack of support from the electorate as first. So they had no issues. They had no self-doubt. It certainly wasn't their first issue. Then money, then party, and then things like they didn't feel they were experienced enough in public speaking. So the point of all of this is that we have lots of work to do, and we certainly could look at modernizing the systems that are in place right now in our locales to increase these numbers of women on your councils. And I think the number one, I know that there's lots of talk about quotas and forced parity, and I don't personally buy into that, so it's not something that I'm going to get into today. But I will say that if you just ask your neighbors, or convince your party, if you're involved in provincial party, to ask women. Go out of your way to look around your committee or community and see who's qualified, or just see who you think, or talk to the people that you think would make good leaders. Don't assume that women are going to do or going to step up and do it themselves. We've established that we have a ways to go on that. So in the meantime, it's kind of on us to just make sure that they have the encouragement and support that they need. I think that was kind of it for me. This gets into, like I say, what Equal Voice does. I've been involved with it for a couple of years. And when we changed the government, we had some of our directors elected, we had some not unelected, and it just kind of fell away. So like I said, if you're interested at all, there is some really great benefits, and there are some really great, these schools have produced some really great results. We have done events at the legislature in Saskatchewan as well. And that's it. That's the motto. Thank you so much.
Do we have any questions? Do we have any questions for this speaker before we move on? I want to just make a comment that in my division, which is Southwest Saskatchewan, we have one municipality that has a full council that are all ladies, and I think that's an absolutely terrific advancement, I guess is the correct way to put it. I think it's fantastic that we're getting more ladies that are taking an interest and are coming forward to help out. So, Jamel?
Yep.
Sorry, Dale.
Sorry.
I did have a question for Tammy. Darren Hill, City Councillor, Saskatoon. I'm the co-chair of the National Standing Policy Committee with FCM on increasing women's participation in municipal politics. First male co-chair ever in the history of that committee. Tammy, I do know that you will come out and do workshops in schools in municipalities, and I just want to ask how somebody would go about doing that.
Well, you can find me on Twitter, where I'm much bolder than I have to admit that I am in front of a room full of people. Otherwise, the website is equalvoice.ca. There is a Saskatchewan chapter link there, and you'll find my phone number. And please do give me a call, and I'll be glad to organize something in your community. Absolutely. Thank you, Darren.
I would suggest the website because sometimes I I find you a little bold on Twitter as well. But I would like to point out, Dale, as well, too, that this is the first time in history that Saskatoon's council has tipped the gender balance. We have 6 female council members and 8 council members, and that was only accomplished by efforts like Tammy has suggested, is actually going out and shoulder tapping people, adjusting our work schedule to ensure that we could accommodate some of those domestic home issues as well, too. So I thank Equal Voice for the work that they do in our province.
Thank you, Darren.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm just going to try this clicker. Okay.
I think you have to change it.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for choosing to be here and listening to us ladies talk about issues that matter really, really a lot to us, and we're passionate about it. And you'll see that towards the end of my presentation, probably. So I work for MCUS, short form for Multicultural Council of Saskatchewan. We are a provincial organization, although our office is physically based in Regina. Our vision is multiculturalism is central to the cultural, economical and political life of Saskatchewan, and our motto is embedded in the provincial motto, from many people's strength. I probably have to balance talking and clicking away. Yeah, okay. And that the 3 relationships that define our province and are expressed as respect for diversity, recognition and rejection of racism, intercultural connections, and integration. There are 5 streams of work that our multicultural work is based on. It flows from 5 values: cultural continuity, celebration of diversity, anti-racism work, intercultural connections, integration. Just a little bit about the organization. It was established in 1975. We also have members, which are 60 organizations. They expand from ethnocultural organizations to different nonprofits, and we even have a couple of municipalities on board. 3 types of strategic investment: provincial campaigns for commemoration and celebration. Multiculturalism Matters is a monthly electronic newsletter that you can subscribe to by going on our website. Every March, we would like to highlight this fact. Every March that we have a March Out Racism campaign. Watch out for the next one coming up. We had a theme called Only Laundry Should Be Celebrated by Color that went for 3 years, very successful. We have a free activity kit that you're able to utilize. You can do it at workplace. If you work at a daycare, you can take it to the daycare and do it with the kids there. This year, we have a new theme called Show Racism the Door. I have a poster with me. If you're welcome to take a look at that if you're interested. Okay. We also do education, training, and consultation. Actually, I've been in Saskatoon since Sunday, participated in the Heritage Festival, then I'm here talking to you fine people, and then today at the same time we have a 3-day training going on in Saskatoon where we are training 26 intercultural facilitators across Saskatchewan. Some of them may end up in a town or city near you, so look out for those. We will be highlighting them in a map across Saskatchewan on our website, probably towards the end of February, early March. And if you are interested in talking or bringing in a presenter who has been trained by us, give me a shout. I'll connect you to them. My position is a very new position. It's also contracted by Canada 150. The initiative is called Welcoming and Inclusive Communities, and as part of that project, we have developed the Welcome Home Pledge. I have the pledges with me. If you want to take a look and take it back to your town or city, you're welcome to do that. We have a hashtag that we are trying to get active on Twitter with hashtag WelcomeHome150, the Intercultural Facilitator Training, which I just mentioned to you. And also, we're very, very proud of this one. It's a lot of work. We are developing a toolkit for municipalities, businesses, organizations, nonprofit corporations, educational institute, pretty much anybody who would like to utilize it, where we have some components that talk about recognition, assessment, commitment, vision and plan, action, evaluation, next step, and celebration of success towards a more welcoming and inclusive community. We're working very closely with ALMA, which is the Alberta Urban Municipality Association, to work on that, to bring you a Saskatchewan specific toolkit. The ALMA toolkit is the only one of its kind in Canada right now, and it's also very supportive, highly supported by CMART, which is the Canadian Council for Municipalities Against Racism. Okay. All right, let's just delve into diversity. What is human diversity? You name it. Pretty much any difference and any similarity that you can put in a category or in a box, that's human diversity. What you eat every day, how you raise your kids, what do you believe in, what do you think is right and what is wrong? That's culture. To me, I may have a different culture from my next door neighbor, like who goes to bed at 8 and I don't. That could be part of culture too. Every person defines their own culture their way. However, it's definitely the more responsive way, the more responsible way is to be educated on how people define themselves. So there you go. Languages, economic status, ability, sexuality, gender, ages, ideas, and interest. Let's look at some numbers. If any one of you are still wondering why are we listening to her, let's look at some of those numbers, because Saskatchewan has received 27,000 recent newcomers to their province till 2016, actually. So this data is even already a year old. Doug Elliott, who we really highly respect, he does SAS Trends Monitor, and he does a very updated version of what Saskatchewan actually looks like in different walks of life. So I'm not going to go much into those details. Now let's see where they're coming from. Who comes to Saskatchewan? Unless you end up here. But that's not true. A lot of us actually choose to come to Saskatchewan because that's where the jobs are. That's where they decide to raise their family. When there is a job, it's not just one temporary worker you bring in, you bring their family, their kids, their spouses, sometimes their grandparents to your province. Their kids will end up with your kids in schools. So we cannot be ignorant of the fact that we don't see diversity or visible minority in our communities. You do need to open your eyes to that. Where are they coming from? Well, according to the stats, most of them, the highest country that they're coming from, the numbers are from Philippines, then it's China, and then it's India. And then you can see different countries following those. And that data is even older. That says 2011 over there. Okay, diversity overlaps. So when we look at this data, according to this one, 1 in 5 residents in Saskatchewan are either Aboriginal or a visible minority. That brings it much closer to reality. Now, when we say newcomers, those are recent immigrants who have chosen to come to Canada and have been here in the last 5 years or so. Just some definitions. This is the most recent data that I came across through the CIC, which is the Citizen and Immigration newsletter. In October 2016, this is a graph that shows how many of us actually settle in urban centers and then who actually end up in rural centers. Before you say, oh, it's only 32%, look at the orange in Saskatchewan. You have the highest number of newcomers settling in rural Saskatchewan than any other province in the country. Tell me that's not powerful. Okay, enough said about numbers. Why should we even care? Okay. If you haven't noticed that Saskatchewan is changing and the demographics around you are changing, take a look at some research. I have quoted a couple of documents here. One article is called Innovation Through Diversity. Innovation has been demonstrated to be fostered by and through diverse perspectives. And just to respect time, I'm not going to go into the details of how the research was carried out, what it involved, but this was the summary of it. Diaspora communities increase trade between Saskatchewan and the countries of origin. In Saskatchewan, we have seen a 1% increase in the number of immigrants associated with increase of approximately 30 million in imported goods and 41 million in exported goods. Again, this article actually I have with me, the influence of immigrants on trade diversification in Saskatchewan. Again, if you're interested, come and talk to me and I'll give you a copy of that. Multiculturalism enriches Saskatchewan on all these fronts, and probably fronts that we are not going to talk about just because of time. Culturally, economically, socially, politically. Just recently in Regina, for example, the Multi-Faith Regina sponsored a refugee family themselves. 4 people from 4 different faith groups came together and said, we got to do something. And they sponsored a refugee family. When you sponsor a refugee family from another country, you're solely responsible for all the settlement needs that family is going to go through. Show them what the bus signs mean, what the traffic laws are, where's the nearest grocery store, you're responsible. That's a huge responsibility that 4 or 5 individuals from 4 or 5 different faith groups have taken as a group. Tell me that's not strong. The city of Saskatoon is amazingly doing so much work. They not only do have 3 full-time staff, now I know they're a much bigger city, who actually work on these fronts. They also have a very good relationship with TRC, Truth and Reconciliation Commission, and Reconciliation Saskatoon. It's all about building relationships. It takes time, but it's worth it. I'll tell you that. Culture. It's important to remember that it's dynamic. We cannot define them through a conversation. You build on it. You enrich it through conversations. For example, I just mentioned, you define it yourself. It could be simple things what you eat every day. When I first came to Saskatchewan 10 years ago, I had a different diet plan from what I am now on. That becomes part of my culture, and that changes over time. It could be me talking to different people and finding recipes that actually take less time than what I was used to or what my mother fed me. It could be simple things like that, or it could be just because now I enjoy other foods more than my own. Core values of a culture usually do not change that drastically or even easily, but we're not here to change them, are we? We're here to understand them. They're passed from generation to generation. Members of a particular culture will not always think and act in ways which are consistent with their cultural background. I have the 4 neighbors that I share my crescent with. I have 2 Caucasian families. They all 3 of them actually have 2 kids. And the neighbor just across me is actually, we share the same cultural background, but I find more similarities with my right-hand side neighbor compared to them. We're all cat lovers, we just found out. And they actually take turns taking care of my cat, who I brought with me this time. Cultural expressions or the cultural iceberg. If you're not familiar with the cultural iceberg metaphor of how to define a culture, this is it. Pretty much an iceberg. What is more visible on the top is only 10% of what culture is. You hear me talk, you know what I look like, you see the color of my skin, you see a headscarf over my head. That's only 10% of who Jamal is. When you eventually sit down with me, you get to know what I believe in. You get to know what I eat. You get to know when I wake up in the morning, possibly if I'm going to tell you the truth, because I don't like mornings. Most of the time, the 90%, like the way deep is our beliefs and our ideas, which actually feed into what you see. The way we dress, the food we eat, the music we like, and the relationships that we hold with each other. Cultural dimensions, they span on different dimensions. These are things that we look at when, how to define them within our own context. Time, gender, I just mentioned I hate mornings. I'm usually late to work. I'm glad none of my work colleagues are here because I admit it blatantly. Gender relationships, hierarchy, context of power, status, communication, how we communicate and what we expect when we are communicating. Emotional expression is amazingly different when you actually start to understand it. Problem-solving approach and conflict resolution. I'm not shy of admitting the fact that I used to look at conflict, or when my antennas went up and I was like, okay, there's a conflict brewing up at work, I would run the other way because that's what my beliefs say, that's what my values say, because we believe in world peace. Who doesn't, right? But we were never taught to how to resolve conflicts. Assertiveness, I can't translate it into my own language because that's something, that's a value or a dimension that we don't have. Being assertive, being able to raise your voice for your own rights and still be polite, how can you do that? Those are two very drastic things for us. But eventually, within the last 10 years or so, through work, through training, through personal experiences, I'm a very good conflict resolution and I'm a very, very assertive person. And usually at the end, I do leave feeling bad and guilty because I still think I'm being rude. But usually, I'm just being assertive. Okay. Okay, so newcomers go through, usually, through a shock curve. It doesn't pertain to only newcomers coming to Canada. If you go to Mexico and decide to stay there for 3 months, you're going to go through this. I'm originally from Pakistan. If you go there and stand at a bus stop waiting for the bus to stop, you're doing the wrong way, man. You have to actually wave at it or possibly even actually jump in front of it for it to stop. Otherwise, they won't. They won't kill you. So they say. Haven't done that yet. Okay, so when newcomers first arrive, it's all sweet. Oh, Canada is amazing. Of course, why isn't it? Who doesn't like safety? Because usually countries that we come from are not safe for us. Who doesn't like I just told you the example of a bus stop, like who doesn't like that? But it takes time to understand that. And we have heard numerous stories of newcomers not understanding that you have to actually stand at a bus stop patiently because they're going to stop for you. We have had that. We eventually actually had a person who actually jumped in front of a bus in Regina. And was reported to the police. But he didn't understand, and that's when the settlement agency helps bridging that gap between the system as you know it and the system as we thought existed. It comes through communication, education, training. And the second stage, very, very quickly, a lot of newcomers dip into is the reality. It hits you. When the bus driver calls the police on you because you jumped in front of the bus, that's when it hits you that, oh my God, reality is more difficult than I expected. And it's very overwhelming. And then you dip down to the situation that you feel everything is impossible. I can't live in Canada anymore because it's a country or a culture or people that don't understand me and I don't understand them. And with time, persistence, compassion, again, communication and training, they start to build themselves up. Feel it's possible to live and work here. When they start to celebrate, when they start to feel they're able to accomplish little things, little successes that they're able to be proud of, that's when it starts to build up. And then it goes through maybe another dip, find some successes, integration, and then not so many. But you start to adjust to expectations. I think I mentioned that through communication. You don't know what to expect when you say be on time. Does it mean that you're going to, when you say be on time at 9, does it mean I should be there at 9:30? Or should I just kind of just tarry along at 10? Or should I be there at 8:45? It takes us a while to understand that because in Pakistan, if you're invited to a wedding at 8, show up at 10. Lesson learned. Then we continue to have some ups and downs, but that just becomes part of life. Who doesn't do that? If you think of your last New Year resolution, right? If you look at 2016, can you just say that it's always been up? No, you would have some unsuccessful periods. You would have some depression episodes. You would feel sad. Some of us have lost members of our families. Wouldn't you say that you're hit by that? Then the human life begins. That's how I see it. And usually, according to the settlement agency's research work, it usually takes, depending on what we bring with ourselves, it usually takes 5 to 7 years to go through that shock curve. Okay, so did I overwhelm you with all that information and you're like already going to just say it's not worth it? Well, with time, it shows me, because you're here, it shows me it's worth it. Because you're here to listen to us talk. You're here to take something away from it. And if it's anything I want you to take away with you, is going to that diversity or respect for it begins with you. How? Be yourself. You don't have to be somebody that you don't know. Be comfortable with yourself. Notice your thoughts, feelings, assumptions, questions, where they're coming from. Ask questions, however, for curiosity, not to say, oh, I think I know what you're going to say, and I'm going to mock you for that afterwards, or I'm going to give you another example of somebody else who I think is from the same country. Don't have those presumptive notions before you ask those questions. Abandon yourself to those questions and be ready for those answers. Take responsibility to learn. Learn about these differences and recognize that you are similar to some of us too. Find individual and cultural commonalities. For example, now more and more, I always thought that Canadian culture or the Western culture was always on time. But look, you're 15 minutes late to this panel. And that things happen, right? And more I find more people who say, oh, I hate mornings. And I'm like, so do I. So it's not just the Western culture that I think it is. No, it's not. It's people. It's individual culture. It's what you define for yourself. If I don't ask if you like mornings or not, how would I know, right? I would just share one small story here about coffee. Everybody loves coffee, right? So I was told. So I started to drink coffee. Mind you, it was just Tim Hortons coffee. And I gained a lot of weight because my digestive system just couldn't adjust to coffee or coffee beans. It was too strong for us. I'm a tea drinker. So a year of indulging into coffee, I stopped. And now I'm proud of it. I'm like, at least because I was doing something that I could not do. My system just couldn't. And then now I just drink tea, and I'm not ashamed to do that because I find more people actually who are tea drinkers or are vegetarians, and they don't even have any vegetarian limitation. They're vegetarians by choice. I'm a vegetarian because I have to be, but they're by choice, and it opens my mind every day. Allow yourself to be blown away by those conversations. Be aware of your worldview and imagine other worldviews. I'm just lucky and fortunate to share a workplace where 5 of us, it's a very small office, there are 5 of us there. All 5 of us are from 5 different backgrounds. I'm a Muslim from Pakistan. My ED is a Jew. My communications coordinator it belongs to the LGBTQ community. My education coordinator was an international student from Eritrea. And then our admin person, I wish they were here, is originally from Germany. Actually, she moved to Canada 5 years ago, so she's still very German. So that's where I go to work to every day. And we have amazingly rich conversations. And every day, we find similarities among us. Forgive mistakes, your own and others. Don't be too hard on yourselves. One thing that we take pride in and still laugh at as Canadians are too polite. There's nothing as too polite. Be proud of that for who you are. Forgive yourself if you do step on somebody's toes, if you do realize that you're making some assumptions, if you do think you indulge yourself in stereotypes and now I'm breaking them, it's okay. It's absolutely fine. If not any other days, today is your first day. Encourage all others to contribute with dignity, build relationships. And relationships basically start with the first one, be yourself. Start those conversations. How are we doing for time? I think I skipped a lot of them. 5 minutes? Okay. I think I have just a couple of slides. Oh, just one more. Okay. So I'm going to skip that. Okay. So I think after this, I have just one more slide. So go back to your town, your council, your city, whatever part of the province you came from. Ask these questions, take these questions back. What would a diverse and growing town look like? I am not the person to give you the answers. These answers will come from you. What would newcomers and Indigenous populations contribute to your town? What are some of the ways to attract and then retain newcomers to your town? You are the only one who would be able to answer these. I can help you, I can support you, I can begin with a conversation or help you start those conversations, excuse me. However, the answers will come from you, and you know your community the best. Don't let Jamal tell you what's good for you. You will get there. You would know. Take the first step. What's the first step? You will define it for yourself. I see this as a human journey. Everybody is on a different step in their human journey. You have to see where you're standing and what that first step is like for you. For example, I was at the Heritage Festival and everybody was like, I don't know where to begin. And I asked a girl, have you ever tried pierogies before? She had never. So I was like, write that down. That's your first step. Get out of here and try pierogies for the first time. So for you, if you've never tried samosas before, go out there and try samosas for the first time. Try something different for the first time. Have tea for a change. Or ask me how I make my tea. That doesn't upset my stomach. Take the first step. It starts with a commitment. Start with a commitment. When you walk out of this hall, say, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this and I'm going to excel at it. It starts with you, with that first commitment. It starts with the pledge that we have developed. We have it both in English and French, and if you look at the pledge, I have a copy with me, multiple copies with me. Take that with you, take a look at that, convince your council to take that pledge, tell us that you have taken it, because I have no idea if somebody is taking it in their small town, in their city, in that corner of the province. Tell us that you have taken it. And there you go. That's the website. It's available. That's about inclusive communities. If you have never, in light of what has just happened in Quebec City, let me just say to you, if you have never heard a Muslim talk, if you have never said hi to her or him, now you have. Now you cannot say that you have never seen a Muslim talk, you have never heard a Muslim talk or seen one. And if you want to have more conversations with me, come and get me. I'm here. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Jamal. Do we have any questions for Jamal?
Oh, my name is Jenna, and I'm a counselor from the town of Bruno. I'm just wondering if you can comment on the high percentage of immigrants moving to rural Saskatchewan. Why is it so high? I'm just thinking that we're rural Saskatchewan, we love having people move in because we like when our population is high. So I'm wondering, what are we doing right?
Well, in 2007, the province of Saskatchewan started a nominee program, the Saskatchewan nominee program, and that was also in Labrador, and I think Nova Scotia also started that with us. That fed into a lot of temporary and workforce, and a lot of people from Philippines actually come to Saskatchewan because of work. The health region needs a lot of nurses. We still need that, but through the nominee program, they were able to get that. So temporary foreign workers are the ones that actually feed into rural Saskatchewan the most. However, don't get hung up on the fact that they are temporary foreign workers, because they are eligible to apply for a permanent residence after 2 years of continuously living and working in Canada, which eventually a lot of them do. And then after that, when they gain that status, they decide to live in that community, because that's where their livelihood is. That's where they are going to raise their kids in. So basically, those were some of the initiatives that Saskatchewan as a province took to be able to bring more newcomers in.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, welcome.
Thank you. Anybody else? I'd just like to say that cultural diversity is the spice that makes our communities exciting and interesting. And just like the spices that we put in our food, it creates that flavor for our communities. And I want to thank you very much for your chat with us today. I'm sorry we rushed you, but time constraints being what they are. I think I mentioned earlier that Bear Pit is after that. That's because somebody wrote it up here in a note and it's not true. It is the resolutions, and they will be upstairs in a few minutes. So I want to thank you very much for joining us. I want to thank our speakers very much for joining us today and taking time out of their busy lives. And I have a thank you card here for each one of you.
Does it? Well, it's like, it's hard to.
But it comes